Welcome to the Keelhauled podcast. I'm your host, CaptainLogun, and we've got a lot of Sea of Thieves news to cover today, so tie yourselves to the mast and hold fast. Ahoy there, pirates. I hope you get yourselves a good weekend. I know I did. This week we have a podcast from Sea of Thieves themselves to cover, to talk about some of the retrospective that they got as a result of the latest trailers, also their thoughts on Lost Sands, mysteries, and where the story is going to be going in the future. So there's not too much outside of that, but I did want to bring up one thing that came as a result of this week, which was the NAL, the Notorious Arena League, has shut down their services. They are no longer going to be hosting or sponsoring any kind of arenas with custom servers, things like that. So we're going to be diving into a little bit about their words and why that's kind of a bummer for Sea of Thieves in general. All that and more in this week's episode of Keelhauled Podcast. But before we get into any of that, I have to thank the patrons. They are the ones that are supporting the podcast just like you can if you head over to patreon.com/Keelhauled Podcast. So thank you to People's Republic, El Cute, Balls, Bam Bam Bagel, Slum, Captain Hasco, Chateau Neuf, Zombie Killer, Cloud, Cosmic Johnson, Davram TV, El Jefe Esteban, Fergatron, Trickster, Jabaro 5, Kazia the Rogue, Lumpy SRQ, Alcarian Darth, Dub Goose, Evil Morpheus, Xbox Mike 29, Murphy Lives, Mutinous Max, Raja the Brave, Regis Stella, Rust Belt Kid, Norwegian, Skinny Matt, Scum Melt 666, Tarnished Film, That Kilted Guy, TN Professor, Real Big Tuna, Big Bad Pad, Mina Fairy, Super Pack, Music Me, The Lore Chronologist Deadeye Dre, Ghost Boy 20, Evil Martha, Peter Miller, Rooski Doo, Straw Hat Connor, Thor Von Blitz, Windsor Chris, and Zam. Wow. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world to me. It really does. And it helps a ton. So thank you so much. And let's get into the episode. So let's jump into the Captains of Adventure, the podcast that came out. This is episode 8. They come every 8 weeks, or 5 weeks. They come out every 5 weeks. This is the 8th episode that they've put out. It has been a full year since they have started up the Sea of Thieves podcast, and it's great to have these. It's nice to know that they are coming on a regular cadence now, and that you can expect a little bit of the behind the scenes of what's going on. Obviously, given that they are taking place before content comes out, they're having to speak to some sort of degree where they know that at a certain point this is going to get released. They can say up to a certain stuff, but they don't want to talk too much in case people have kind of missed out on content and they don't want to spoil things. So a lot of what they talked about in this episode was more retrospective. And it really kind of started off with the Captains of Adventure trailer, the Xbox Bethesda showcase. They just came off of that, as well as the Lost Sands reveal stream, where they showed that Golden Sands was being saved when they sat down to record this. So it was kind of interesting to find out that this is close to the beginning of July, and this was recorded shortly after the middle of June. So I liked what they talked about, how they were first kind of talking about the trailer. And one of the big takeaways that I got from this was that they wanted to have the trailer be a thing that you took away from the Xbox Bethesda showcase that stood out differently from the rest of the show, and that they really didn't have a whole lot of time to really talk about this. So originally they were planning on doing just a normal trailer with some narration covering the different points of captaincy in Captains of Adventure. And as they were kind of toying around with that idea, Paul Cunningham decided to suggest that it was going to be a song, and that they jumped on that opportunity. So John McMurtry, not McFarlane. McFarlane's the one that's head of community engagement. John McMurtry and Mike Chapman and Chris Davies went and started working on lyrics, if I recall who was involved with it. And they started to kind of, hammer out some of the things that they wanted to do, some of the things that they wanted to get across in the actual trailer. Then they went to Robin Beanland, who worked probably really hard to try and come up with a really catchy tune to try and make it interesting enough of a song that you would get kind of that earworm, that the earwig, or earworm that would kind of keep you humming it in the background as you were thinking about it. And it really did work. It's a great song. In fact, it's probably one of my favorite songs next to the loading screen song. That is when you're loading into Sea of Thieves. It doesn't happen quite as much as it used to with the Series X or fast servers or no hard drives. You don't really hear like the full song of the load screen as much, but it's one of my favorites all the way back to when I was playing the scale tests, and you would have to log in and then it would authenticate for a very long time. You never were quite sure if you were actually going to get in, but you could listen to that music, and that music is something that I have fond memories of, like jumping into the scale test when hearing that song and when you're loading in and stuff. So I really appreciate it. When they finally kind of came out to kind of showcase the song, the first go around, it was kind of interesting because they weren't quite sure it would hit, and I'm surprised by that because they usually have a lot more confidence going into those, but they weren't quite sure if this would go over well. It did end up going over really well, and I'm really glad they decided to do it because I think it's probably one of the better trailers that they've done that didn't, in their words, showcase a new area or a new monster or anything like that. This was just a captaincy update, something they've been working on since 2018. Well, not like actively working on, but something they've desired to work on since 2018. So I'm really glad that they got a chance to do that. So let's dive into Lost Sands, which was the next topic that they brought up in the actual podcast. Joe adamantly says that it was rigged. I 100% agree with him in this case. And it looks like they enjoyed the fact that people were picking sides and getting emotionally invested, and that the changes to Golden Sands will be significant, but not for the next several months as they continue to work on it, and that there will be another community decision. So maybe there's going to be probably about 2 a year from what we're thinking. The question came up about how players or how they felt about the fact that there were different mechanics for each side. With Reapers, you were delivering crates on rowboats. With the saving, with Merrick and the hunters and stuff, you were getting different merchant items and bringing those to Golden Sands. And they've decided that they are thinking they want to, or they haven't decided, but they're thinking about going with a more symmetrical approach for future choices to make sure that it still fits the theme, but at least feels a little more fair, so that you aren't feeling like you're doing something you don't want to do for the side that you want to support. And I think that's a great way to approach this. I think that it's a smart way to look at it in the future and decide, if you want this to be something that is based around the decision that people want to have, then you want to make sure that each side is done so that it feels like you're not having to do anything too drastically different than the other side. And I do hope that they make this something that you get both rewards if you decide for one side or the other, and that you just get credit for the completion of the actual choice, not forcing people to do both sides of it, especially if we aren't going to know too much in the future about what the impact will be, and that impact will be something that comes over the next 6 months. I did really appreciate the conversation around the live changes that were actually going on before that happened, before they had kind of announced what had been going on with Golden Sands, whether it was going to be saved or destroyed. And they're actually calling this the story service, or a service that is dedicated to the story for Sea of Thieves. It's a new system that allows them to change the world based on things that are happening, different qualifiers that are happening around community engagement or adventures, things like that, and even the mystery. And I really like this. I like the idea of it. It's kind of like when we were playing World of Warcraft, or when I was playing World of Warcraft, there was a system that they brought in with, I want to say it was Wrath of the Lich King, and it was the difference of shards. They had different layers that would happen, and as you progress through the quest or a quest line, the world would change. This really happened in, I would say, Cataclysm is when they really started to kind of implement this. And as you completed quests, you would come back to different areas, and those areas would have dynamically changed on the world or in the world based on where you were within the story. Now, the way Sea of Thieves is doing this is way different. They are doing live changes that are happening as the world evolves. This isn't something that is leaving some people in different parts of the world that are not progressed based on where they're at with the adventure. No, everything's changed at once, and it's changing in real time. And that's something that I have yet to see in other games. A way to kind of express real world change in the game to different islands or things like that. We've seen this already with the fog lifting from Golden Sands after the announcement of it being saved. We've seen this with the notes showing up, the footprints on Sea Dog's Rest with the mystery, things like that. And it's amazing. It really does kind of lean into the thing that I was searching for when I was talking to Mike last time he was on the show about the world feeling static and stagnant, and them wanting to bring more life to the game. We didn't know it at the time that mysteries and adventures were what those were going to be. If I had to kind of add anything to this, I would say that I'm still hoping for some sort of design where we get something that's kind of like what we're seeing with Adventure 5. In spoilers for Adventure 5, at the very end, there are two characters that show up, and what happens in that adventure, that cinematic that takes part in game, is something that really made the world feel alive. I felt like Belle had showed up at that moment. She jumped off her buoy. She was on the dock. She was interacting and communicating with Amaranta, and Amaranta was communicating and reacting back. And then she was in our world and then traversed into the Sea of the Damned, where we saw a portal of what was going on there. It was dynamic. It was something that was going on in the actual game. It wasn't a cutscene. I see a lot of cutscenes with games where you get to a story point and it opens up into a cinematic. The cinematic is a lot more curated, a lot more well designed and planned, and your character is there, but you have no control over it. You are just watching the actual event happen, whereas this is taking place in the world. While I think that is great and I love it, and I think that they progress for that, I would err on the caution, or I would caution them to be careful about where they have these events happen, and have them maybe happen in different areas from time to time, because one of the main concerns that I've seen with Adventure 5 is griefing. People are knowing where people are going to go for these, or other people know where people will end up having to go for these adventures if they realize what they're working on, and they will try to lie in wait and disrupt the event that's going on in the actual game. And that really detracts from some of that kind of interesting interplay with having story being delivered dynamically in the game, like real world or real time, without it being a cutscene. So I like it, and I think that's the way they should go with some of this. But with this system, one of the things that I think is kind of a shame, and they talk about this a little bit later on as they're talking about how Adventure 5 is the most like a Tall Tale that they've ever had. And I would agree with that, but it is a shame that Adventure 5 is a 2-week event, that if players who are not quite familiar or strong enough to be able to feel like they can immerse themselves in the adventures are going to miss out on this. They're going to miss out on the story and the relevance, or they may come into it with missing other parts of the adventures in the past half a year and not understand the context of what's going on. And while you can have as many of the cinematics up front or posts on the website that kind of break down what the story is so far, nothing is quite the same as experiencing it in game. And that is where I feel like Tall Tales really serve a purpose. Tall Tales in Sea of Thieves do the job of curating a story-like experience for people that they can replay on demand and be able to go through the world and the history of it when they get into Sea of Thieves. Because as far as they know, when they first get into the game, that is the start of time for them. And the Tall Tales that first came in back during the anniversary update have no time relevance to them. They don't know what's going on afterwards, and they won't realize it that things have already happened in the game until after they've already completed all of those tall tales. So it's a nice way to kind of have things locked in time so that people can experience them on their own thing. If you look at games like Destiny, they've removed a large portion of their past content, much to the chagrin of the other players that liked having that content present. I myself missed out on a lot of story, a lot of history for Destiny because they removed a lot of it. I got to play through a lot of the campaigns, but because I wasn't there, I always missed the relevance, the importance of the characters, the dynamic nature between different characters, why it was so sad to lose Cade, what importance did it have with Uldrick or Ulrich, I can't remember his name right now because he's just called Crow. But those points were lost on me because I came into the story so late in the game that I'm having to play catch up through videos on YouTube that people were able to capture and upload from past events, from past seasons. And while Sea of Thieves is doing a great job, the community is doing a great job of doing a very similar thing by being able to record through the different adventures and put those up online. And Sea of Thieves is Rare's planning on having the cinematics available on their YouTube channel with write-ups kind of explaining the story so far. It always comes back to the idea that it's not quite the same if you can't actually enjoy it as it's happening. And that's something that the adventures are losing out on, that the tall tales could serve as a purpose. So I always wonder, like, if you could have adventures be something that is released live, interact with it, enjoy it, get the story from it. But once the adventure is done, have something that kind of gives you that adventure or those adventures, multiple adventures, since there happens to be like a 3 cadence to this. There's an opening, a climax, and an ending. Have those built out as tall tales, something that would be able to be put in the game at a later time that would then take people through the story with each adventure tall tale, and have each adventure, like the first one being Shrouded Isles, and have that take you all the way to Shrouded Deep as a tall tale with checkpoints. Then have the second one with the Forsaken Island and in the Forsaken Hunter and saving Golden Sands and Lost Sands and stuff. Have people go through that process as a tall tale with checkpoints. And that way you are still kind of honoring the past. You're giving players access to the history of the world and give them an opportunity to do that. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and say, hey, do this. It's armchair development. I don't have to worry about the money, the time, the energy, the manpower, the dev time that it's going to require, the complications with that in a world that is ever evolving. I don't have to worry about that. I get to sit here and say, this is what they should do to try and make sure that people aren't lost with the story when they get to the point that they are in the game and they're seeing what's going on with current relevant stuff at the moment. So I 100% fully understand that there's a very unlikely chance that this is actually going to happen. And I'm sure, based on the information that they've given us, that they plan on using NPCs in the game as a way to play catch up. The relevancy of those characters needs to be really kind of showcased. You really, like, they mentioned Umbra as someone who logs a lot of the adventures that's going on in Sea of Thieves, but it is not her, or the narrator, or John McMurtry's pirate in the trailer for Captains of Adventure, being the one that tells us the story of what's going on. So I hope that it's not something that is relegated to 1 or 2 people in Sea of Thieves that may get lost in the woodwork of what's going on. I hope this is something, and Mike knows I probably feel this way about it, but I hope that this is something that it is the conversations that are happening in taverns with pirates that are talking about a story. And if you want to know the story, you can sit down and talk to them, and they'll regale you of the tale of, you weren't here, but welcome to the Sea of Thieves. You may not understand the history of the new Golden Sands outpost, so let's talk about that. And they'll sit there and they'll have a nice little narrated dialogue that will tell you about what's going on. And people can come and go if they want, and they can sit down and you can talk to pirates in the actual taverns and hear the stories of the different adventures and have them tell the tales, so that it's not put upon the older people that have been in the Sea of Thieves for a while to make YouTube videos, to make podcasts, to do streams, to try and tell those stories. Like, those stories are great, but they're so lore centric that it would be better to have it as something that is told by the actual NPC. So I'm hoping that they do something like that. That is something in 100%. Blind Bob is someone that is underutilized in the game, and I would not be surprised, and I would be very happy if Blind Bob got a little more relevance than the random Sea of Thieves jokes that he has down in the Pirate Legend Tavern. Before the game was coming out, there was someone who had a birthday in the forums, and they released a video of Blind Bob. Now, there was no narration at the time, but the story that he told was one of the Kraken, and telling us who the Kraken was, or what the Kraken was, what it did to a ship, what it cost, and it instilled a sense of fear in you when you read it, because you weren't sure what the Kraken was, what it was capable of, and that was kind of the air, the mystery around the Kraken at launch. Ahoy there, pirates. This is the ad for this episode, and I did want to let you know, if you wanted to avoid these and just get a regular filler, you can head over to the Patreon. There's a special feed just for patrons that get the ad-free version. If you want to keep listening, though, I can't say I blame you, because this week I want to let you know about Loot Crate and getting 15% off of most crates and crate subscriptions when you use the link and code RobotsRadio in the show notes. Also, you can head over to audiobooks.com, get your first 3 audiobooks for free, and that can include any 2 VIP books, or use the affiliate link for Green Man Gaming. If you're a PC gamer or you'd like to save money on games, it's one of the benefits of being a PC gamer. Head over to Green Man Gaming. You can get codes for Steam, Epic, any of the different stores that they have deals going on. They have deals going on all the time, and if you plan on buying there, please consider using our affiliate link. All of that goes straight to me through the network. Thank you all so much for everything that you do to support this podcast. It means the world to me, and I continue to try and improve the quality and the content for you. With that, pirates, let's get back to the show. So we've talked about the mysteries and catching up. We've talked a little bit about adventures and stuff like that. I wanted to talk about the cinematic trailers that they touched on in this podcast. They love, and I really love them, using trailers as a way to build up the lore around the adventures. They did mention that there are going to be a planned 12 trailers per year, and that kind of speaks to them having at least 12 adventures, and we're already up to 5 right now, so you can expect another 6 or 7, hopefully within a year's time frame. Not necessarily just within 2022, but at least within the next year. Hopefully we'll have 12 adventures that they are commissioning from real time to be able to have these done. I really like that they are willing to spend the money on this. It was something, again, that I talked about a long time ago, how I missed the cinematic trailers at E3, how those were the announcements for the upcoming expansions to the game, with Forsaken Shores, Curse Sales, and then Shrouded Spoils, which I think, was Shrouded Spoils the last one? What was the last one? No, we had, I'm thinking, because we had 2, and before that it was the Hungering Deep. Shrouded Spoils was never actually in that thing. And I loved in the video too, you actually had that little muted bit that John McFarlane was talking about, where he was kind of letting on more information. They had to mute that audio, which I tried lip reading. I'm not really good at it, but it definitely felt like a False Snails moment. If you get the reference, you get the reference there. But I love that little thing there. But I'm glad that Sea of Thieves, I'm glad that Rare is willing to spend the money on these. It doesn't feel like there's a big return on this, but given that this game is a real-time game, that is a shared world experience, that it is ever evolving, all the marketing terms you can think of to explain about how this game is constantly changing, the trailers really do give us a snapshot of what's going on in the world at that time. And even if you may not understand the context, because it is alluding to an adventure that we have yet to play, it still sets up the premise of these are the characters in play and these are the stakes involved. And I do appreciate that. They did touch on one thing that came as a result of all of this, which was the next decision point is supposedly going to be amazing. And I'm very interested to hear what people think about this. I personally think it's going to be something that leads to the resolution with Merrick and the Sea of the Damned. I think we are going to have to make a decision between stopping the Reapers or stopping the Brethren Court, and that people will have to pick a side, or it will have to deal with Duke and Merrick and having to make a choice about saving one of them, because so many people still really love Duke. They're very bummed that he's a bad guy. They never saw it coming. And a lot of people are very tied to Merrick. They want him back over at Stephen Spoils so that you can turn in meat there, and fish there to be able to get credit for those commendations. So I would imagine that it would come down to between two people, that it is a matter of killing one or saving the other, and it comes down to, which one are you going to do? And I think Duke is a good enough person that people would want him to be redeemed. So many people really liked Duke, and having his redemption would be something that would be desirable. But at the same time, people have been built up to like Merrick, or at least to be associated with Merrick when it comes to things tied to the Pirate Lord and Bell. So there's already cogs in the machine that are turning, that are pumping us up to really love Merrick and give us a reason to care about Merrick. So I wouldn't be surprised if they use that as kind of your pivot point. Do you save Merrick? Do you kill Duke? And have it be a choice between the two. You either save one or save the other. And that kind of a community decision would be very interesting, because it would then determine the fate of one of the main characters in Sea of Thieves, which I will say, after watching Stranger Things, there is a lot of plot armor that I think gets tied to main characters. And while I appreciate the desire to want to have people not lose their favorite character, something I had to deal with when I was going through Game of Thrones until the last couple seasons, and then I quit on it, was that certain characters you learn to love, and everyone has their own, but losing those characters can be really tough. But sometimes you can have really great moments in a storytelling experience if you go that far. And I always say that if you're willing to kill off one of your main characters, then you're willing to bring in someone new and trust that your audience will fall in love with them the same way that they fell in love with your original character. So never be afraid to kill off someone that people love for the sake of pushing the story forward. You can always do that. And there's many ways that you can do that without necessarily killing off people. But if indie games have taught me anything, it's either kill off someone to invoke a sense of emotion, or go safe and go with mechanics. And in this case, I say it's totally fine for us to kill someone off, whether it be Merrick or whether it be Duke. I think it'll be a great experience either way. I think it'll be an emotional experience either way. And I think it's definitely one of those things that would be a hot button topic between the community. All right, so the last thing I wanted to talk about with the podcast episode was Captaincy. They kind of recapped Captaincy and some of the things that you can expect without going into too many details. Obviously, it's a couple weeks away right now, so I expect this week to be one of the weeks that they start ramping up more information about what you can expect with actual Captaincy. But from this, they kind of told us some of the stuff that we already knew, as well as a little bit of stuff that maybe didn't quite get as emphasized as they would have liked with the trailer. But we know that we're going to be naming our ship. We know that our ships are going to be on the crests. We know that those crests will have a 20 character limit, if I recall, and that we're going to be getting new interiors. The new interiors are going to be interesting. I'm kind of wondering how that's going to work with the sloop. The sloop has probably the least amount of customization possible, given that there really isn't a whole lot there. You've got like a captain's table and a couple shelves to put trinkets on, but there's not really a whole lot there that you can really change up. If I think about the actual sloop, you've got the map table, the shelving unit that they have in there, which I'm assuming is going to be for those the ship logs or the captain voyages. Like that's kind of because each one, if you look at each one has like a different color theme to it. Each of the color themes really does kind of represent some of the different trade companies. So I wouldn't be surprised if the captain's, I mean, the captain's voyages are probably going to have to tie to the different factions. I don't know. I'm still not quite sure on how this is all going to work out, but that's something that could probably change. The little shelf unit there. Then you've got the captain's table. You've got I don't think the covers for the windows are going to change. I don't think anything like that's going to happen. You have the curtain, which it's always been the insider curtains, or the I can't think of what they were, but it's always had the same image of it, and they had it switched over at a certain point. There's also the bird cage. The bird cage could change up as well too, and that's about it. There's not really a whole lot on the bottom or in that bottom area of the sloop that I can think of. I mean, they might do something with the bed, or there's a shelf above the bed that they might do something with, but I don't know. It doesn't even seem like it's a proper bed, to be honest. So I'm very curious to kind of find out, like, how is Captaincy going to look for sloopers, for duo sloops and solo sloops? Is Captaincy really going to impact them compared to a galleon? A galleon has so much stuff in it. We've seen so much stuff in it, from the chandelier to the chairs and the tables, the shelving units. We've seen so much of that change in the trailers so far. And I just don't see an equivalent translation from the galleon to the sloop, where there realistically is not a quote unquote captain's area. So are they going to do things that will allow you to adjust different aspects of the sloop, given that there's not an equilibrium between the galleon and the sloop as far as the customization features for those captaincy things that we've seen change up? Something I'm really curious about, and I'm hoping that that's something that we'll find out in the future. Well, I'm sure we will find out in the future, now that I think about it. I just want to know, prior going into this, what that's going to look like. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that Mike really emphasized the choosing your path, and that the ship really is something that will embody who you are as a player, and that the cosmetics for your ship will be the way that you represent that, and that people will be able to see your cosmetics, and they'll be able to see your ship name. And the ship name is something that will appear on your crest. But then they talked about having banners, like the way that you sail over to the islands, or when you run up to the different trade companies, like the gold hoarders. When you run up to a gold hoarder, it tells you what the gold hoarder banner is, and it pops up with that. So you'll be able to actually see these things from afar. So you actually know who's who based on when you scope in with the spyglass, based on the island, or not the island banners, but your ship banners, which was kind of an interesting thing. And something that I wanted to touch on is that was a feature. And I don't know if I like the way there's the way it's going to be implemented with these banners. I really did kind of hope it was going to be like a UI element that tied to the table, the map table, that is, so that once you scope in on a ship, you'll see what the name is, and then that ship will be present for a certain amount of time on your map. And if they venture too far away from you, and you don't look at them again at a certain amount of time, whether it be 15 or 30 minutes, then you lose track of that ship. You don't see the name anymore on there, and they disappear from the map. Otherwise, if they're in visual range, then you scope in on them, you see what their name is, and then you can track them as a result and have an idea, so that the map table will be kind of the way that you would kind of, if this were back during the days, you would have a captain's log. The captain's log would notate the ships that they would see on their bearings and their location when they encountered them, and what kind of government they represented. All of that stuff was logged. So it's something where I hope that that's a way that they kind of have it tied to more than just like island, or the island banners that pop up, because there's already a bunch of banners that pop up and stuff, and we've already got accessibility tools built in to reduce those, to streamline ones or slimline ones, or just remove them altogether. And a lot of people have just removed them altogether because most people know what the islands are based off of where they're at and what the islands look like. So very curious about that. They mentioned something that I really am curious how this is going to work out, because they did mention ship loadouts in the trailer, but they've talked about having multiple ships, and I assumed that meant different saved loadouts for your ship. But from what it sounds like you are going to be buying ships, and that the actual captaincy theme, the Captains of Adventure theme that was from the trailer, is going to be something that is kind of pared down and then used as background music for when you talk to the pirate lord to buy your first ship, which makes me think that this is something that will be done in the Pirate Legend Tavern. It's the only thing I can think of is that you talk to the pirate lord, you buy a ship from him, and he kind of walks you over to the ship that's in the Pirate Legend Tavern, and it's your ship now. You get to name it, and then you get to do the cosmetics for it, and all that stuff is down there, and then you get to sail it out through the waterfall. That's kind of what I'm thinking. It makes the most sense in my mind about how I would do it, so that's kind of what I'm feeling. But maybe that is the way that you can load in your captaincy ship, since I know that was a goal back in the day that they wanted to have for captaincy. Back when they were talking about it, they wanted to have you kind of sailing through that waterfall, have you emerge into the world in a very Goonies-esque style. And I really love that idea. But they did mention that the choosing your path would be tied to a ship. And that way you could have multiple ships and then multiple paths. So I'm really kind of wondering, like, how the heck is this all going to work? Do you have to unlock cosmetics for all of your ships at once, or just for the ones that you're currently working on? How is that going to work when you want to transfer to a different ship? Like, what happens when you want to switch up the progression of your ship? Like, are you able to change your ship loadout dynamically in game? Is that something that's even possible? Like, we haven't seen that tech yet, so I'm really kind of wondering, like, what if you want to work on multiple ship cosmetics through the system and be able to unlock those somehow, but do so in the same server? Is that even possible? So really kind of curious there. We did find out a little bit more about the Sovereigns, and I thought this was a great way to kind of end off the actual podcast. Mike goes into the Sovereigns and talks about how they're really kind of uptight, or I always think of the word posh, but I think he said the word hoity-toity or something like that. I can't quite remember what he said, but it was something along those effects, where they were very kind of upper crust, upper echelon of society. You know, they have the most lavish things, and you can tell by the powdered wigs that they're wearing and stuff. And I'm looking forward to kind of meeting them and seeing what's going to happen with them, because it seems like they are going to work exclusively with captains. And if that's the case, then that suggests that there's going to be a locking point, something that you cannot do right off the bat. This is not something that everyone's going to have access to. So I'm curious to know what the unlock process is for this. If it's something like a quest line, or if it's just going to be related to gold, or even doubloons in this case. I think doubloons would be a great way to kind of utilize that system to be able to buy cosmetics, to be able to unlock ships in a way that is not just tied to gold, because gold feels like such kind of the base level of currency, whereas doubloons are a little more rare. They're a little harder to get, and a lot of people have them, and I think this is a great opportunity for you to buy ships using doubloons as opposed to gold. But finding out about the Sovereigns, there was mention about the way they look, if I recall, and that there's key things that kind of tip you off to them being, because apparently they are pirates who have been paid off, which I'm assuming that this is a reference to the Grand Maritime Union. Grand Maritime Union in the comics was something that was very kind of higher echelon type of people. They thought well of themselves, and they had the gold to back it up, because they controlled most of the trade that went on in the Sea of Thieves as well, or not the Sea of Thieves, in the world, but had always sought to get to the Sea of Thieves. And it makes me think that the Sovereigns were paid off by the Grand Maritime Union. They were told to set up shop and get accustomed with the pirates and sea thieves, but to be a little more kind of picky about who they do business with. So I imagine that they will probably be doing business with the trade companies and with the captains, and that they will talk to like leaders of the trade companies, obviously, because they got I don't know. Now that I think about it, they might just be taking all of that stuff that we turn into them out of the Sea of Thieves as well too. I don't know how they feel. I don't know really how I feel about that though, if they take it out, because right now most of the stuff that we turn in, like the merchant stuff, that leaves the Sea of Thieves. That's usually it. Some of it does, not all of it, but some of it definitely leaves the Sea of Thieves. With Order of Souls, everything goes to them, and then everything they learn goes to the gold hoarders in the form of maps. Everything with the gold hoarders goes to the gold hoarder in the tribute peak and stuff. So all of the dues and all of the payments and stuff get sent there. And then I think pirates take it out. I don't know how that cycle works. Eventually it gets removed and put back into the world, or there's just an exorbitant amount of gold buried everywhere, and we just, for whatever reason, it hasn't. I still don't quite know how that all works, but I will be very curious to find out if the sovereigns have any clues that will give us direct ties to the actual Grand Maritime Union. In this case, I would expect to see some anchors and some emblems that kind of give us clues to the Maritime Union and kind of tie them in, so that we understand kind of like who is the next big bad in the world. Like right now we've got the Brethren Court and the Sisters of Mercy. We've got or the Sisters of Sorrow, I should say, and we've got the Reaper's Bones and the Dark Lord Duke with Flameheart and Stitcher Jim still kind of out there. But the Grand Maritime Union seems like the civilized world coming into Sea of Thieves to put a stop to all the fun stuff that's going on, which is just the general, joyous, rambunctious kind of kid-like attitude towards piracy. We're all having fun essentially, and they're the ones that want to come in and establish order. So I'm very curious to find out kind of how this is all going to work, and I'm glad that they're saving it for the future. But unfortunately, due to the nature of what's going on and when this is getting released, I'm going to be in England by the time this gets launched, which means that next week's episode is actually going to be a community, the Gold Hoarder one. That's actually going to be the next episode, is the Gold Hoarder event, where hopefully we'll have more information to be able to talk about that, so that we have something to talk about, because I'm going to be gone the last Saturday, where we will have a Monday afterwards for that. So we're kind of having to shift schedule, or I have to end up canceling the community event, which I understand is kind of a bummer to those that are supporting through the Gold Hoarder program. They're the ones that are wanting to have those episodes and stuff. And while it's not something that's necessarily promised to them in writing, it is something that I want to do with them. All right. Well, on a more somber note, let's talk about something that is not going to be coming to Sea of Thieves anymore, and that is the Notorious Arena League, the NAL. If you don't know who these folks are, they are some of the pirates that were setting up tournaments for Arena crews during the time where Arena was available. As you know, Arena shut down earlier this year, and they've been trying to try and do something that will keep the community alive without having custom servers and having servers that have the Arena available to them. It is extremely hard for them to be able to continue to have access to the custom servers to be able to do events like this, especially that Arena is no longer a mode that they can access. And because of that, it's really hard to justify keeping something going when you don't have the tools or support necessary to be able to have something like this happen. With things like the Race of Legends, it's a lot easier because a custom server, you designate the path that you travel, you set up the obstacles that they have to overcome, but it is all in game in the adventure world. In Arena, you have Arena. If you don't have Arena, that's a little tougher. So they put out a post today that was tagging Sea of Thieves directly, And it said, thank you for the years, or thank you for the fun over the years. Players, thank you for your hard work and excellent skill. Rare was generous to give us a good 3 years almost in Sea of Thieves, or in competitive Sea of Thieves, and we loved every minute of it. Sorry it didn't work out for everyone. And this was just a little bit of what I saw, thanks to some of the folks that were going out and getting different information about this. Chenzo posted in chat something that was pulled from, I believe, their Discord server. It says, hello everyone. Over the past 2.5 years, the Notorious Arena League has been serving the competitive community in Sea of Thieves. Our mission was to be a platform to grow the competitive spirit in Sea of Thieves, find out who the best teams and players are, and give them an opportunity to grow their team and brand on social media. After 7 seasons for North America and 5 seasons for Europe and several off-season events, we have decided to resign from the affiliate alliance and stop all league ventures from here. This decision does not come easy, and we fought with everything we had to preserve and maintain the competitive spirit. At this point, however, the passion and drive that made NAL what it was has run dry. We appreciate all of you who stuck with us after Arena closed and gave us the benefit of the doubt on the future of the NAL. We've seen all your hard practice and effort. This was a very hard thing to decide, and we ask for your understanding. We did not feel it was appropriate to keep it up without being able to give everyone a proper update. We've made so many friends and memories together. I hope we can focus on that as we reminisce on what we've built here. Thank you so much for joining us over the years to find out who the best teams and players were. We are grateful we got the opportunity to serve you. Much love to everyone. And it's a bummer. It's a real shame. I just recently had this experience, but with something that was a lot more closer to what I love, which is the competitive spirit for Heroes of the Storm. They just announced that they are no longer going to be producing any content for Heroes of the Storm, and as such, all of the fan-based community events, the competitive side of that was done from the community aspect, has ceased. They are moving on to other things. They are doing other projects, and even the podcasts that were covering the game still are changing. They're pivoting into something else. I hope that the folks that played Sea of Thieves in the NAL will still find a place in Sea of Thieves adventure. It's a shame that the competitive side of Sea of Thieves was so heavily dependent on Arena, and even after Arena, it was a shame that unless you had a custom server, it was really hard to set things up. It's extremely hard to get multiple ships on a server. So having custom servers helped make that easier, but without the actual Arena mode, which had a lot of the infrastructure and design around having a smaller playfield for players to be able to go in and actually set up these things to be able to compete, it's really, really tough to justify this. I will say that custom servers are something that they are still working on, something that they are still looking to bring to the community. And I saw a really nice reply from Mike Chapman, who is currently on vacation at Disneyland in Paris, I believe. And a lot of it came from Captain EG, or Inigo Zulute. I have no clue how to say your name, EG, and I'm sorry about that, but you know I love you. He said, and actually I'm going to read through his whole thread because it was a very good thread. Today we say goodbye to the Notorious Arena League, and while I was not a follower of the NAL, the reasoning behind them quitting is totally valid for anyone. I don't know if Rare realizes how important currently custom servers are. Like literally, I have a big list of stuff I'd love to do with custom servers. It's such a fundamental tool currently to create content for the game. Hopefully by the end of this year or next year, we could have some advancement in custom servers. Also, more transparency from Rare on this topic would be great. I know developing custom servers is very hard, but I believe we deserve some info. And that's from EG Gamer on Twitter. Thank you, Captain EG. Mike responded to this and said, totally appreciate this. We're pushing hard. There's a lot of foundation work and technical challenges to overcome, but we're making progress. There is a bright future ahead, we hope, for custom servers, but that takes time. Appreciate everything NAL has done for Sea of Thieves. And he's not wrong. The NAL was one of the outstanding communities out there that was pushing the community side for Sea of Thieves, the PvP side of it, in a fun, safe environment for people to be able to have a competitive nature. And losing that is a real shame, but it was a decision that Rare made to focus all their efforts on adventure, because at least with adventure, they could allocate resources to drive and push the in-game story, as well as the upgrades to the different things they want to do with the game through adventure. And having Arena was a really great test of what competitive esports would look like with Sea of Thieves. Unfortunately, it didn't do as well as we hoped. They didn't add enough modes to it to make it interesting. And with the added changes that came as a result of tweaks to the combat system for player versus player, it really did kind of reduce the reliability and the stability of the game in Arena, which was a shame. I always was still a big fan of the original Arena. I wish they had kept it that way. I probably would have played more of that. It's a shame to see a lot of people who were fans of Sea of Thieves and probably still are fans leave the game as a result of this. I saw a couple people say that they weren't even aware of the NAL, and that's a shame, because they poured their hearts into making content for Sea of Thieves at a competitive level, a level that Rare even tried to do with Guardian Con. They went to Guardian Con and had a tournament there. They went to New York E3 and they had a tournament there. And Xbox One X's were customs and custom skins, and they were given as prizes to the winners of the tournaments that were at those events. They wanted Arena to be big, and I think a lot of us did. And when COVID came in, it really did stop all conventions. So conventions were kind of the main driver for them to push engagement with it. People could see, like, hey, you've got 25 or 24 minutes or 15 minutes in a match, and you have to try and do as much as you can to get as many points as you can and still deal with the other ships and stuff like that. And that was a really amazing way to try and play Sea of Thieves in a way that most of us would not really engage with, and that's a shame, because I think there's a lot to be said about how the Arena side of Sea of Thieves helped hone in skills that you would not necessarily get, because the crews that you typically faced in adventure would be a varied type of level of either commitment to the fight or just skill in the game. I do think that having consoles separated out so that you could have a preference really made a big difference in how good you feel about going into PvP. But I still think that there's a lot of work to be done to make the game feel like PvP is a viable tactic, because right now, if I'm being honest, and I talked about this a little bit over the weekend while we were streaming, I feel like hit registration is in a good place for cannons. When I shoot a shot and I use a cannon, I know that hit is going to make a hole, and I know that that hole will get bigger the more I hit it in the same spot. I don't know that all of my gunshots are going to register, especially with people DPI switching, with people finding ways to get around things like, that plus just server latency, things like that. I can never really trust that the guns are in a good place. I will say that I have noticed a big change in stability. Stability has gone up really, really high. I think that the game is in its most stable it's been in a long time, especially over the last year and a half. I haven't seen them dishing out any more apologies for losing data, especially given that the last time that we saw this was when they tried to give us the voyage that was for the Mea Copa voyage, giving us the oh God, I can't even remember how many it was, but it was like 40 captain's chests, which was a ridiculous way of saying that we're sorry we lost the data for when you were sailing. Here's a way for you to go try and make that up. Good luck. I haven't seen any of those, and I haven't seen any messages about them having any data loss, which to me shows that they are fixing the problem, not trying to create a solution to remedy the fact that the problem isn't going away. And that's what I would rather see. I would much rather see them just fix the problem as opposed to having a fix or a band-aid for the problem itself. So I think they're there. I think they understand what they need to do for the game. I think they are getting to a good place with it. And I think that the content that we're getting, bear in mind, this is still season 6. I think the content that we're getting is the best content that we've had since A Pirate's Life. I think that they understand what they want to deliver with each season, and they want to make sure that the season's main features hit well, which is why they are delaying the season, which I've seen with Destiny. I've seen with other games. They are willing to delay a season because they want to make sure that the content that is being produced is content that will hit well when it actually comes out. That's exactly what all of us want. We would much rather wait a little bit longer, play something else, or just work on other things in the game to till the content is actually ready, till the content is actually polished. And right now, the content that I've seen has been pretty polished. There's been a few issues with, I think, Shrouded Deep. We had the weird bug with the ships flying around. Since that update has moved on, it hasn't been an issue. I haven't seen any flying ships lately. I've seen still a few bugs here and there. I'm not saying the game is devoid of any bugs, but the day-to-day play that I've had with the game has still been very solid, and I haven't run into any major issues sans the death bug that's going on right now, which, if you don't know, the death bug right now is a real bummer. So if you happen to die and you come back and you're completely without clothing and all of your emotes are missing, log out of the game before you do anything and then log back in, and most of the time you will get all of your clothing and your emotes and stuff back, your titles and all that good jazz. All of your vanity stuff gets taken off, all of your clothing gets taken off, your title gets taken off, all of your assigned emotes get taken off. If you have that happen, please, before you touch anything in any of the chests, log out, log back in, see if that fixes it. That's so far been the best advice I've seen. I had this happen to me. I was really annoyed by it because setting up 10 pages of radials for emotes is exhausting. And I haven't gone back and do it again because I really just don't want to have to spend that 15 minutes to have to try and go through all of the different pages of emotes, set them all up on all the different radials. It's a really bad system. I wish I had a better way of designating it. And honestly, the fact that this bug is causing that is a real black eye on what has so far been a great update to season 6. So I'm hoping that doesn't persist beyond the next couple of weeks when we get the next season and they're able to nip that in the bud, whatever weird kind of recognition that is. And they've also had some interesting discussions around these respawn timers. The respawn timers are about half of what they have been in the past. I want this to stay in. I like the shorter respawn timers. It gets me back into the game. I think it's an arbitrary number designed around the balance of how long it takes to sink a ship. I think if you're good, you can still sink a ship. I think if you're bad, you're going to run into a situation where you're not going to be able to sink them as easily as you had in the past. Bear in mind, I play half on PC, half on Xbox. In fact, I probably play more on Xbox right now than I do when I'm actually playing Sea of Thieves. I play mostly on my Xbox right now, and I have not had too many problems sinking ships, even with the faster respawn times. And in fact, I've appreciated the faster respawn times to get back to my ship, so I have a better chance of actually saving it. So I hope they don't mess with that, because I actually really like that. Please don't mess with it. And people will get used to it the way they got used to Barrel 2.0. And with that, I think that's about it for the stories that I really wanted to cover for Sea of Thieves. Next week's episode is going to be the community episode. I'm banking on the fact that we're going to get more information around Captaincy as we get a week within the launch of it. So I'm hoping that they dive into that this week, so we'll have something to discuss. I know a lot of folks have been playing on Insiders. I plan on jumping into Insiders after this episode goes live. I want to take a look at what's going on in there. I haven't been spoiled, but given that I'm going to be going to SoT Fest on the 21st, I want to be able to see at least an idea of what's going to happen before I have to go travel and I'm going to be away from my Xboxes, because I'll probably have my laptop, but I can't bank on being able to use the laptop to play Sea of Thieves. And because of that, I want to try and get some of the information there so that when I do go there, if I want to talk about it, I'm not going to be talking about stuff that I'm not familiar with, because I hate doing that. And I hate missing out on that kind of stuff as well too. So I'll be looking forward to kind of diving into this once I actually get a chance to check out the Insiders. And with next week being a community episode, it'll be a little easier for me to talk about or to not talk about NDA stuff, because it's mostly going to be about what the community wants to talk about. It'll be kind of their episode to really talk about some of the topics they want to. So it's on them to kind of come up with what they want to talk about, and I actually dive into the NDA to find out what the heck's actually going on, because I have not been spoiled on it outside of Captaincy. Captaincy is the one thing that everyone's just kind of casually mentioned around me when talking about what's going on. And with me being under the NDA, obviously I'm not going to be talking about that, but at least they know, like, I'm in the know in the sense that I am legally required not to talk about it outside of when we're actually in it. So Pirates, that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you all for hanging out with me this week. It was great to have an opportunity to dive into another episode of the Sea of Thieves podcast, the official one. It was great to see James there again. I love having James on the podcast. I love having John McMurtry there. And as always, I love seeing Mike, John, and Joe kind of sit down to talk about Sea of Thieves. It was a really fun episode. If you haven't gotten a chance to go watch it, I would recommend going to watch it just for the sake of being able to see John McMurtry's I Killed DeMarco shirt, John McFarlane's reptile shirt, animal print shirt, which was hilarious. The almost water through the nose for Mike, that was a great one. Also, the accidental curse slip that slipped, or the cuss that slipped out of Joe. All of those things are really great to kind of see when they happen and how they react. I love watching the devs because they feel like they're a big family. They feel like they're a big group of friends that hang out on a regular day basis, and they just happen to make a really good video game at the same time. So that's going to do it. If you want to get a hold of me, there's plenty of ways to do that. Head over to Twitter at CAPT_LOGUN. You can always email me at CAPTLOGUN@gmail.com. You can always reach me on Xbox at CaptainLogun. There are plenty of ways you can get a hold of me that don't require trying to get information that I don't provide on a regular basis. If you don't know how to get a hold of me and you're listening to this, that means you haven't gone to the show notes, because the show notes for every episode has had the same exact information on how to get a hold of me. And I'd really prefer it, honestly, and I'm speaking to one person in particular, if you're listening to this and you got a hold of me in a way that is not one of the ways listed in the show notes, I would really prefer if you don't. I would rather hear from you in a way that I present myself, which is the way that is socially acceptable on any of the platforms that I put myself out there on, and I'm on a lot of platforms, to get in touch with me. So thank you for reaching out. Don't reach out the way you did in the future, okay? And with that, Pirates, and I apologize for the cryptic nature of that, but realistically, there's lots of ways to get a hold of me. I love talking to you guys about the game, but I prefer to do it on the mediums that I present myself on, not the ones that you have to hunt and find ways to get my information without my permission. So thank you to everyone who is listening, who understands what I'm going through. I will see you all next week on the Sea of Thieves.
listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.
Looking for an RPG podcast that isn't just D&D?
Roll to Cast is the answer.
No, wait, sorry. What games have we played so far?
Well, we've done Cyberpunk 2020.
What does it mean to have a voice?
And there's going to be something big coming, Chumba.
Hey, if you're listening, I won. I beat you. You suck.
There was a time when we were slamming things against our phones and
Vampire the Masquerade.
Chloe, Sam.
You can't use those words.
He's going to grab Vincent, press him against the wall.
I mesmerize him. This is Adelaide's Anarch move. Burst out of your chair. Your hand goes to your gun and you draw.
Hulk Cthulhu.
Told you I had it.
We've all got the quips going. I love it so much.
Right there. Screechy child. My favorite daughter.
Maybe after what we just seen, we're feeling a bit trigger happy.
And the new Cyberpunk Red.
Babe, you're good, but we're better.
Thought maybe you might be able to give me a counter off.
Dos Vidania.
Straight through his neck.
I don't see bone either, but I'm not going to look. My leg's fine.
I always knew you wanted to fly, kid. Come find me.
Roll to Cast.
ROLE.
A new game every season.
Original music.
Original stories.
Interviews with the creators.
And delightful Aussie accents.
Listen to us on all good podcatchers.
Even support us on Patreon for bonus content.
That's Roll to Cast.
ROLE.
Come discover a new world.
Are you interested in starting a podcast, but you don't know how to get started? Are you concerned that your podcast just isn't reaching the audience that you're trying to reach? Well, this is Robots from the Robots Radio Network, and I have a podcast for you. It is the Podcast Creators Guide. You can check it out here at robotsradio.net on any podcatcher and listen every week for quick tips and updates for how to get you started and growing your podcast even faster. Check it out today. The Podcaster's Creators Guide.